Paraphrasing like a pro. What does it actually take to put information into our own words? That sounds like such an easy task to ask students to do, but actually it's one of the hardest. In this video, we're going to take a look at the strategies that we teach students to be able to paraphrase like a pro. So let's begin. The first thing we'd like to do is just clarify, what does it mean to paraphrase? So these analogies are meant to help students see all of the ways that we already paraphrase in our everyday lives. So to begin, if we take flour and eggs and sugar and butter and we mix it up, what do we get? Yeah, we can make a cake, right? That's a wonderful example of a paraphrase. Anytime we bake or cook, we are paraphrasing. Secondly, if we take a fruit platter and we mix up the fruit, we change the organization or the arrangement of the fruit, we could make something like an edible arrangement. This is a great example of a paraphrase that's also given as a gift. Our third one is a pile of laundry. And if we mix that up, what can we do with it? Well, yeah, we may not like it, but we can fold it, right? And we can organize our clothes. And that is exactly what paraphrases do. They organize, they rearrange. It's the same information, just mixed up differently. And so that's really what we want students to think about and know when they are asked to paraphrase information. Doing a few more examples here, we've got a piece of ribbon. What can we do if we mix that up? Yeah, we can make a bow. What about a pile of damp sand? How can we mix that up? Yep, you guessed it. A sand sculpture. And lastly, fruit, veggies, yogurt, and ice. What can we do if we mix that up? This is my personal favorite. We can make a smoothie. So we want students to think about that a paraphrase is like making a word smoothie. They take the information, they mix it up. It's all still there, but it doesn't look anything like the original. So moving on to summarizing, that's like taking a cake and now not becoming, but in this case, shrinking to a cupcake. Not that would ever want to shrink a cake, but if we had to, a cupcake is a wonderful example of a summary of a cake. A fruit platter, if we take a little bit from this fruit and a little bit of that fruit and a little bit of the next fruit, what we would make is a fruit bowl. So we wouldn't want the entire fruit platter, right? We just want a sampling of it. And that's what a summary is. It is a sampling of all of the information, the essence of the information. A pile of laundry, if we shrink that, we could either end up with an outfit or we could end up with a vacuum sealed mass, right? Those bags where we put it in, we attach our vacuum hose to it, and it pulls out all of the air. That's what a summary is. It is the most condensed version of the information. And so that's what we want students to think when they hear the word summary. We want them to think shortest or most condensed version. So going through a few more examples here, if we take a freight train, we could shrink that down to a model train. A steak, if we shrink it, take away all the juiciness, we would get jerky. And lastly, grapes. If we shrink those down, we're going to get raisins. So these are all the types of images, of analogies that we want students to think about when they hear the word summarize. So here on the screen are all of the ones that we just went through. This is great for students to see, to maybe talk about their favorite ones. Which ones did you like? Which ones resonated with you? Just as a way to help them really process this information. And it's a great opportunity for them to sketch or jot down a couple of them just to help them remember what these two phrases mean. Now, the reason it's so important to go through them is that paraphrasing and summarizing use a lot of the same strategies, but they have very different end goals, right? The end goal of a paraphrase is to share the same information, but in a completely different way, versus summarizing is to share the essence of the information, just the highest level information, not all of the details. So, same strategies for the most part, but very different intentions or outcomes for each of these literacy skills. So there are 8 strategies that we teach for paraphrasing and summarizing, and actually 7 of them are used for summarizing. There is one that we only use for paraphrasing. So just going through these really quickly and talking about also how we annotate them, you will want to have markers in each of these colors or colored pencils or colored pens are fine as well, but we prefer the thin tip markers and highlighters to do our paraphrasing work because it just adds the color where we need it to really help these strategies make sense. The first one is to keep. And this is a strategy that we love to start with just to say, hey, you don't have to change out every single word when you paraphrase content that you just read. There are words that you will be able to pull over and not get in trouble or have any risk of plagiarizing if you do, right? So this is strategy one. It's what we just call as keep. And what we do here is we just highlight with a yellow highlighter the words that are okay to pull over into our work. Rephrase is the second strategy, and that's to find synonyms or other ways to say words and phrases and even entire sentences. And for this one, we put a box and we make a brainstorm. We put some lines with bubbles and words with or examples of synonyms or other ways to say that information in those bubbles. Restructure, we draw a line with a curved line with arrows there to just showcase which words we are connecting to say, hey, we're going to just rearrange the organization of this sentence. We might take this part here and put it at the beginning, or maybe from this section and add it before the what was originally at the beginning of the source text. To combine, we underline in blue. So pretty simple, but we look for all of our blue underlines that go together to create a new combined content that we would write. Categorize is number 5, and we use a classifying design for this. We put the details or the examples, and then we think about what category do they all belong to. Number 6 is one of my favorites, but this is one that only belongs for paraphrasing, and that is to select phrases to incorporate as direct quotations. We never have direct quotations in summaries. To invert, to state the inverse of information, is really to kind of think about like a flipped version of that. Oh, and back to number 6, we bracket or highlight in pink on this one. And then to invert, we just draw a squiggly line in purple. So we just say we're going to kind of give the flipped version, not the opposite. We're not telling incorrect information. We're not making up information. But what we're thinking about is like subtraction to addition, right? It still is related. It's just the flipped or the inverse operation in that case. Omit is the last one, and we can either just leave that information alone or we can strike through with a red pencil or marker just to say this information is not important. We're not paying attention to it. We're not pulling it into our writing. So we have a book here, The Eyes of Animals, that we will go through to work on the strategies. So here's our first page. Owls do not see color the way people do. Their world appears in shades of black, white, and gray. This helps them see clearly to hunt at night. So we're going to start with strategy 1. What words can we keep? And so on this one, I'm going to highlight and just show you, we can absolutely use the words owl and color and night. Those words are all nouns, which is one of our keys for that keep strategy. Usually they are nouns because there's not a lot of synonyms for nouns. The second is to rephrase, and those are words or phrases that we want to say differently. So this is just what our eyes go to or what our brain thinks about as words that we know we can think of other ways to say them. So people, we could say humans, right? In shades of black, white, and gray. Maybe we rephrase the order of those, but we can also say that as grayscale. See clearly to hunt at night. Oh, well, if they can see clearly to hunt at night, that means they are stellar nocturnal hunters. So notice we're not looking for direct synonyms every time. We're looking for other ways, a rephrase of the information. So this is really important because we don't want students to go word by word and create a paraphrase. That's actually called a parallel paraphrase, and it's really not a great strategy or habit to get into. We want students to do what we're doing here of look at larger groups of words, at phrases, and think about ways that they can say those differently. Another way I could say they see clearly to hunt at night is that they search for prey throughout the night. Okay. All right, looking at strategy 3 to restructure. This one will be the last one on here. I want to kind of just rearrange where I actually talk about people instead of owls first, even though I'm writing about owls and how they see. So with all of that, potentially my paraphrase content could sound something like, Unlike humans, so that's that restructuring. I'm starting with the people part first. Unlike humans, owls only see in grayscale, but this actually makes them stellar nocturnal hunters. So you see, we're sharing the same information as the original source, but we've made a word smoothie. It doesn't sound anything like the original. We've got some of the same words in our writing that we have in our original, but we have such an interesting new structure to what we've written, and we've pulled in so many rephrased versions of the original information that it doesn't sound anything like it. Okay, let's try again with the second page. Eagles' large eyes help them hunt. They can see small objects from very far away. They can also see in color. So looking at strategy one, eagles, eyes, color. Now, once you highlight a word like eyes, you don't need to highlight it every single time. We're doing that on each of these pages because we're isolating each page to really talk through the strategies. But when you're reading a large piece of text, we don't want to stop every time. It's not a word search, right? And try to find every single time that the word eyes is written. Once you highlight it, you can move on. Okay. So eagles, eyes, and color. Rephrase, let's start with the word large. Well, that has a lot of synonyms. So we want to think about synonyms that are appropriate for the context here of the eagle's eyes. And we don't need a ton. Just two are great. Okay. So for large, we could say huge or grand. And then for see, we could say, well, they identify small objects, they view, they spot, they perceive. Small objects. Well, that could be tiny things, things that are in the distance, and maybe prey. But I want to talk here for just a minute about prey. Is that something that is accurate and acceptable for small objects? Why is it even in question? This has to do with background knowledge, right? There's nothing in the text that tells us that the small objects are prey, but maybe we know that already because we already know about eagles, or perhaps that confused us. We did additional research and we figured out that eagles look for prey, right? Either way, what we're doing is we're pulling in background knowledge, and that's something that needs to be determined if it's okay to pull into the paraphrase. What we did or what's being exemplified here is we went online, looked for what are small objects that eagles search for. And here is one of the sources that pulled up, A Moment of Science. And looking at the very first sentence here, an eagle circling 300 feet in the air looks to us like a dot in the sky. But even from that height, the eagle is scanning the ground for prey. So we've got support. We have a source here to back up our background knowledge that we can pull into our writing. And so really the question becomes, am I paraphrasing the article solely and I need to stay true to what's there? Or am I paraphrasing the information? And if I'm paraphrasing the information, as long as I can show that it's research backed, that it's accurate information, then I can pull it into my paraphrase. So that's really what this is showcasing, that if the task is to paraphrase the article, then we do want to be cautious about bringing in background knowledge or outside sources because that is not staying true truly to the article. But if the task, which is most often what students are asked to do, is to paraphrase the content, what's the essence of the information, can they show us that they've comprehended what they've read? Then it is okay to pull in background knowledge, so long as one, the information clarifies the concept, and two, it adds relevant information. Okay, so lucky for us, prey or tiny prey gets to stay. And then let's take a look at can see small objects from very far away. We could say, oh, that means they have clear eyesight or keen eyesight. And then let's take a look at strategy 4 to combine. So in this case, I just want to combine eagles, see small objects, and color. And so notice we've got blue lines in a few different places. We have it in the original text, and then we have it under the brainstormed rephrased sections. And that's because we want to make sure that we're not just combining from the original source, but we're also integrating our rephrased versions of it. So that might be something like, Eagles perceive tiny prey in color. So I combined eagles see small objects and color, and I've said it in my own way. Or I could say tiny prey are perceived in color by eagles. That's using a little bit of that restructuring just in terms of starting with prey as the subject of the sentence. So you can see at the bottom there what our paraphrase content would be since they have keen eyesight and perceive the world in color. Eagles have incredible eyesight. Okay, let's take a look at macaws. Macaws can see more colors than people can. They also have incredible depth perception, which means they are very good at knowing how far away something is from them. Okay. In this case, we've already got the paraphrase content being displayed, but I want to go ahead and just show you, just for practice, really, what are all the words that we could keep. Our rephrase, those are popping up as well. By now, you know what we want to do is find phrases and single words that we can think of synonyms for. We typically think of adjectives and verbs as two types of words or parts of speech that we can utilize for the rephrase strategy. Okay, so all of those are popping up for you to see. Okay, so that was the strategies 1 and 2 about macaws. But what I want to get to now is actually strategy number 5, which is about categorizing, right? So if we have eagles and macaws and owls, can we see that there is a larger category here? I think we all can, that these are all birds. So this is really a strategy that is helpful for paraphrasing, but it really starts to hint at what we want to do with summarizing, right? Of shrinking down, of getting to more of an essence, not all of the details. So birds would be a great category to pull together to find some kind of information we can share at that level rather than just at individually at eagles, owls, and macaws. That's going further on the spectrum into more of the summarizing skill set. So if we take a look at the information, though, that we have paraphrased on each of these about our eagles, our owls, and macaws, then we have to think about kind of how it all flows together. That many birds have incredible eyesight. Some see in color like eagles and macaws, while others, like owls, only see in grayscale. Eagles, owls, and macaws view the world differently to help them survive in their environment. And then we could follow up with the paraphrase sentences about each of the birds. So this is where paraphrasing and summarizing kind of, while they're distinct, they worked very well together. This is a great example of that for you to see. And this is where, when we paraphrase, when we take someone else's writing and make it and say it differently, this is where our insight really shines. Okay, so let's take a look at the page on bees, and this is where we're going to talk about my favorite strategy, which is quoting. Bees have 5 eyes. Their 2 large eyes are made up of thousands of tiny eyes. They also have 3 small eyes that help them tell how bright or dark things are. So we'll fast forward through the keep. Now notice we've got nouns popping up of bees and eyes, but now the rest of these 5, 2, thousands, 3, those are all numbers. So nouns and numbers are really the two types of words that work for strategy number 1. For rephrase, going to pop all of those up. We've got large, made up of. Now take a look, we're doing an entire sentence here. So remember that for strategy number 2. We can do it at the word, at the phrase, and even at the entire sentence level. Their 2 large eyes are made up of thousands of little eyes. What do we call those? Compound eyes. Small, got some good synonyms there for that one. And help them tell how bright or dark things are. That means they are light sensing or they can detect brightness. So sometimes the paraphrase will be longer, sometimes it will be shorter. There is not a rule in terms of a paraphrase being one or the other. It could even be the exact same length. So quoting, This is one of my favorite strategies because what we like to teach students to do is to pull in a phrase rather than an entire sentence or multiple sentences. And that actually is a more sophisticated use of pulling in direct quotations. And what I love about it is it just flows seamlessly into their writing. It doesn't even sound like they're quoting an original source. So, what we tell students or what we encourage students to do is look for a phrase that you feel like you couldn't have said it better. You feel like the way that the author said it is so clear, it's would benefit your writing, and you don't think there's a better way to say that information. So, in this case, when we look at the information about the bees, a phrase that stands out to me, even though we actually found a synonym for it, is the phrase made up of thousands of tiny eyes. It's just a really great definition of what a compound eye is. So that one's been highlighted in the pink. And now from there, look at how we combine the keep, the rephrase with the quote. Bees see with two giant compound eyes, each made up of thousands of tiny eyes and three little light sensing eyes. So notice you don't even hear where the direct quote starts and ends in terms of how the sentence reads. And that's what we're getting at here. Find phrases that are so rich, that are so powerful, and that you can weave the rest of your writing around, and it sounds like they're just meant to go together. All right, last one we're going to take a look at all together is on snakes. Snakes' eyes are on the sides of their heads. They can only see things well up close. So for this one, we've got our 1 and 2 already showing on the screen. And so I want to talk about strategy number 7, to invert. When this strategy works, it works great. When it doesn't work, we're creating false information, and we certainly don't want to put that into our paraphrase. So for this one, we just draw a squiggly line and we talk about how can we say this information differently. So they can only see things well up close. We can make that an if-then statement. If they can only see things well up close, then what does that mean? Well, in that case, let's talk a little bit about stating the inverse in terms of practicing it. If 30% of boys at school prefer basketball to soccer, then 70% of boys at school prefer soccer over basketball. If 90% of the world's population is right-handed, then 10% of the world's population is left-handed. So notice we're not making up false information. We're not skewing information. We're just simply telling an inverse. We are giving the flipped version of the information. So as we take a look at they can only see things well up close, if they can only see things well up close, then snakes cannot see far away. So that could be a way that we share the inverse. Same concept, same information, but we are just stating the inverse of it. So there you have it below in the paraphrase content. Great information that was shared in the original, but now in our own words. So as you've noticed, keep and rephrase are utilized on every single one of these pages. So while the other strategies are kind of a buffet that you can choose from, deciding which words we can keep and which words and phrases and sentences we need to rephrase, those two strategies are required every single time for every single article, for every single sentence and paragraph that students need to paraphrase. Okay. So the rest of this handout and resource are pages for you to go through and have students practice paraphrasing. So they're set up like this where you've got more pages from the text and students can decide which of these strategies fit. This is why the colors are so critical because as students work together or as work is shared with you, you'll be able to see which of these strategies they've utilized and if they've done it correctly. So continue to work on paraphrasing and summarizing. This is such a critical skill for students to learn how to do because not only does it impact their writing, it also impacts reading comprehension. Everything that they're doing here to work on saying this information in their own words is helping them learn the information on a deeper and deeper level, which is the ultimate goal of learning, right? Is to comprehend, to analyze, to make connections with information that students are that they're learning. So with that, I encourage you to utilize these strategies, teach them strategically. You can go one by one and go through them to help students understand what to do with them and start to combine them. Let them try out on these different pages so that they can paraphrase like a pro.